Most people spend their entire lives wishing life were easier. And that wish, that quiet, persistent, devastating wish, is the very thing that keeps them exactly where they are. Let me say that again, because I want it to settle. The wish itself is the trap, not the difficulty, not the circumstances, not the economy, not the government, not the neighbor who seems to have all the luck. The wish that it were easier. That wish is costing people their lives. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, one day at a time, one missed discipline at a time, one abandoned effort at a time. And most people never even notice it's happening until a decade has passed and they're standing in the same place, wondering why. I want to spend some time with you today on an idea that changed my life. It was given to me by a man named Mr. Earl Schoaf, a man I met when I was 25 years old, broke and out of ideas. I had a young family. I had promises I could not keep. I had more month than I had money, and I had excuses. Oh, I had plenty of those. I had excuses stacked to the ceiling. The economy was this. My background was that. Nobody ever showed me how. If you'd have listened to me back then, you would have thought the universe itself had conspired against a young man from Idaho with nothing in his pocket and nowhere to turn. And then I met Mr. Schoaf. And he said something to me that simple men say with profound effect. He said, "Jim, don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Don't wish for fewer problems. Wish for more skills. Don't wish for less challenge. Wish for more wisdom." I didn't fully understand it that day, but I wrote it down, and I thought about it. And over the weeks and months that followed, as I began to turn it over in my mind, the way you turn a stone over in your hand and see it from all sides, I began to understand that he had handed me a philosophy, not a technique, not a tip, a philosophy. And a philosophy, once it takes root in a man's mind, changes everything. It changes what he sees. It changes what he does. It changes what he becomes. And that is what I want to talk with you about today. Not shortcuts, not hacks, not clever little tricks that promise much and deliver little. I want to talk about the kind of thinking that, if you truly adopt it, if you truly let it take root and grow in the soil of your mind, will change the trajectory of everything that follows from this moment forward. I want to talk about the philosophy of getting better. Now, let me ask you something. Why do most people wish for easier rather than better? I thought about this for decades, and I think I know at least part of the answer. Easier is immediate. Easier requires nothing of you today. If circumstances were just a little different, you think, then you would finally be able to move forward. If the boss were more reasonable, if the market were more favorable, if the kids were a little older, if the timing were just right, if the economy would cooperate for once, if the stars would align in the way they seem to align for other people, for those lucky people who seem to succeed without visible effort. Easier is always just around the corner, just one change away, just one piece of luck away. And so a person waits. They wait for easier. They wait for the conditions to improve. And while they are waiting, and this is the part that breaks my heart, life is happening. Time is passing. Seasons are turning. The spring that should have been planted is passing into summer, and summer into fall, and fall into another winter. And another year has gone by without a harvest. And the person who spent that year waiting for easier is now a year older, a year further from where they want to be. And here is the cruelest part, a year more convinced that the world is not cooperating, a year more practiced in the philosophy of wait. And then, and I've seen this so many times it stops surprising me, they find a new reason for easier just around the next corner. Next year will be different. Next year the market will improve. Next year the kids will be grown. Next year there will finally be time. And next year comes. And the same story repeats in a slightly different costume, telling the same lie. Here's what I've found to be true about seasons. Life comes in seasons, just like the year. Spring, summer, fall, and winter. They come and they go and they come again. And the farmer knows something that the wishing man does not. The farmer knows you cannot negotiate with a season. You cannot complain winter away. You cannot wish spring forward. The season is what it is. And your job, your only job, is to plant in the spring, tend in the summer, harvest in the fall, and prepare and rest and plan through the winter. That's the deal. That's always been the deal. And the farmer who understands this works within the seasons, works with the laws of nature, works with what is, not what he wishes were. But what does the person who wishes for easier do? They look at winter and say, this shouldn't be happening to me. They look at the empty field and say, someone should have planted this already. They look at the bare trees and say, why is it taking so long? And the season does not answer. The season does not negotiate. The season simply passes. And then spring comes, another opportunity, and the wishing man is still unprepared, still waiting, still wishing it were easier. And spring passes too, and fall comes with no harvest, because there was no planting, and another year is gone. The philosophy of wish you were better understands seasons. It understands that winter is not the enemy. Winter is the classroom. Winter is where you study. Winter is where you plan. Winter is where you sharpen your skills, read your books, examine your habits, and prepare yourself so that when spring arrives, you are ready. You are better. And a better farmer plants more seeds, tends them more carefully, and brings in a richer harvest. Not because the season was easier, because the farmer was better. I remember it was a winter morning, early February, still dark by 7 in the morning in that part of Idaho, and my father was already up, already moving. He was a farmer. He spent his life working the land, and he understood something in his bones that takes most people decades to learn from books, if they learn it at all. I asked him once when I was young, Papa, what do you do in winter? The field is frozen. There's nothing to plant. And he looked at me with that quiet patience that farmers have, because farmers learn patience or they perish. And he said, son, in winter, I get ready. That was it. That was the whole answer. In winter, I get ready. I was too young to fully grasp it then, but I've spent a lifetime unpacking those 5 words. In winter, I get ready. I don't complain about the cold. I don't wish it were spring. I don't resent the hardship. I get ready. I prepare. I study. I plan. I sharpen. I become, in those cold, quiet months, the kind of man who can do justice to the abundance of spring. That, my friend, is the philosophy of wish you were better. And it is a philosophy available to every human being on the planet, regardless of circumstance, regardless of background, regardless of what has come before. But most people never adopt it. Most people spend the winter wishing for spring, and spend the spring wishing they had prepared in winter. And the cycle repeats, year after year, decade after decade. And they wonder why the harvest never improves. Now, the seasons metaphor runs deeper than most people take it, because in any given life, there are multiple seasons happening simultaneously. There is a season of your career, a season of your relationships, a season of your health, a season of your finances. And they don't all align. You might be in a spring of professional opportunity while you're in a winter of personal challenge. You might be in a rich summer of family joy while your finances are in a bare and frozen winter. And the wisdom, the genuine, hard-won wisdom, is to recognize which season you're in each area of your life, and to respond to each season appropriately. The person who tries to harvest in winter will come away with nothing. The person who doesn't plant in spring will have nothing to harvest in fall. And the person who doesn't use winter, who wastes the preparation season, will always be surprised by how little they have when spring comes. Surprise and readiness are opposites. You are never surprised by a season you prepared for. Here is the great question then. What season are you in right now? In your career? In your finances? In your most important relationships? And more critically, what does this season demand of you? Because the discipline of the season, the appropriate action for this moment, is rarely what feels comfortable or exciting. Planting is hard work. Tending is unglamorous. Harvesting requires speed and focus. And preparation, true winter preparation, requires a kind of invisible, unrewarded diligence that most people find very difficult to sustain. But sustain it is exactly what the few do. And the few, that small, remarkable group of people who genuinely thrive over a lifetime, are almost always the people who have internalized the seasons, who have stopped fighting the season they're in, and started asking what the season demands. Let me move to the second great idea here, and it's one that Mr. Shove pressed into me early. He said, Jim, you must work harder on yourself than you do on your job. Now, that was a peculiar thing to hear. I had a job. I was trying to hold down a job. Working harder on myself than on my job seemed like advice that would get a man fired rather than wealthy. But I thought about it, and then I thought about it some more. And here is what I discovered. Your job gives you wages. Working on yourself gives you a fortune. Let me say that again. Your job, any job, gives you wages. Working on yourself, your skills, your philosophy, your habits, your disciplines, your knowledge, your character, working on yourself gives you a fortune. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but with the same quiet certainty that a seed buried in good soil becomes, in its season, a tree. The growth is happening even when you cannot see it. Formal education, I've often said, will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. And I don't mean just financial fortune, though that often follows. I mean the fortune of a life well constructed. The fortune of relationships built on genuine substance. The fortune of a mind that can think its way through difficulty rather than waiting for difficulty to pass. The fortune of knowing who you are, what you value, and where you are headed. That fortune, that profound, multidimensional fortune, comes only from working on yourself, from treating your own development as the primary project of your life. Now, here's the remarkable thing about this. It doesn't cost much. Books are cheap. Libraries are free. An hour a day of focused self-improvement, 1 hour a day, compounded over 5 years, over 10 years, produces results that most people would describe as extraordinary. But it isn't extraordinary. It's just arithmetic. It's the arithmetic of discipline applied consistently over time. If you read one good book per month, just one, in 12 months you've read 12 books. In 5 years, 60 books. In 10 years, over 120 books on your field, on your craft, on leadership, on communication, on finance, on health, on the human mind. Do you know how many people have read 120 books on their chosen discipline? Almost no one. Almost no one. And yet the path to that number is 1 book per month, 12 per year. Nothing heroic, nothing exotic. Just the daily discipline, applied consistently across time. Some people say, Jim, I don't have time to read. And I say, really? How much television did you watch last week? And they look at me a little sideways because they know the answer. They know the hours they gave to entertainment that gave them nothing in return. No skill, no wisdom, no compounding growth, just a momentary escape from the life they have not yet had the courage to build. And I'm not against entertainment. I'm against the exchange rate. I'm against trading the hours that could make you better for the hours that keep you the same. Miss a meal, but don't miss your reading. That's an idea my mentor gave me, and I've passed it along ever since, because it captures something true about priority. Your mind is more important than your stomach. Feed your mind with the same discipline that you feed your body. More discipline, actually, because the mind is the engine of everything else. The mind is where the philosophy lives. The mind is where the disciplines are formed. The mind is where the future is constructed before it is lived. Let me tell you what happens when you commit to reading. Not casually reading, not flipping through pages when nothing else is on, but committed, intentional, consistent reading of books that challenge your thinking and expand your understanding. What happens is this: you begin to see patterns. You begin to see connections between ideas that you would never have noticed if you hadn't been reading across subjects, across disciplines, across the experiences of people very different from yourself. And those connections, those moments when an idea from one book illuminates a problem you've been wrestling with in another area entirely, those moments are among the most satisfying experiences available to a human mind. But more than the specific ideas you encounter, there is something that reading does to the quality of your thinking over time. It exercises the mind in a way that no other activity does. It requires you to be still, to concentrate, to follow an argument from premise to conclusion, to evaluate evidence, to distinguish good thinking from poor thinking. These are skills that deteriorate without practice and develop with consistent use. And in a world increasingly defined by distraction, the person who has cultivated the ability to concentrate, to sit with an idea long enough to truly understand it, has something rare and valuable. Here's what I found to be true about the people who succeed. And I've had the privilege of knowing many, from all walks of life, from all backgrounds, from many countries and cultures. The people who succeed have made a decision, somewhere along the way, that they will work harder on themselves than on anything else. They've decided that their personal growth is not optional, not a luxury for when they have more time and more money, but a daily requirement, like food and sleep. They treat self-education the way a serious athlete treats training. The serious athlete does not say, "I'll train when I feel like it." The serious athlete says, "I'll train today, because today is the only day I have, and the competition is training, and I intend to be better tomorrow than I am today." That is the discipline. That is the posture, and it is available to every human being. But most will not adopt it. Most will wait until they feel more motivated. Most will wait until the conditions are better. Most will wait. And the ones who do not wait, the few who decide today, who begin today, who commit to the daily disciplines today, those are the ones who look back in 10 years with a life they've genuinely built, and who look at the distance they've traveled and feel something rare and precious. They feel earned satisfaction, not luck, not fortune bestowed from the outside. Satisfaction that is owned, that is deserved, that no one can take away. Now I want to talk about what I call the daily disciplines, because disciplines don't announce themselves. Disciplines don't always feel important in the moment. That's the deceptive thing about disciplines. They appear small. They appear insignificant. What's one page of a book? What's 1 hour of study? What's one good meal? One walk around the block? One conversation with a mentor? Tiny. Insignificant. Barely worth mentioning. And yet here is the truth about disciplines. They compound. They accumulate. They build upon themselves the way interest builds in a bank account. Quietly, invisibly, and then suddenly with breathtaking speed. Now the counterpart of discipline is also true, and this is the part that most people don't want to hear. The failure to practice disciplines also compounds. The small neglects also accumulate. Missing one workout doesn't matter. Missing 1 week of reading doesn't change your life. Going 1 month without calling a mentor, 1 month without serious reflection on your direction and your habits seems entirely survivable, and it is. The problem isn't one missed discipline. The problem is what one missed discipline becomes. It becomes a habit of missing. It becomes a pattern of, I'll do it tomorrow. And tomorrow has a terrible track record. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The easiest thing in the world is to neglect what matters most. Because what matters most is rarely urgent. Reading isn't urgent. Exercise isn't urgent. Deepening your relationships isn't urgent. Examining your philosophy isn't urgent. None of these things have a deadline attached. None of them will cause immediate consequences if they're skipped today. And so they get skipped today and tomorrow and the day after. And somewhere, quietly, without announcement, without a moment of dramatic reckoning, years pass, and the person who skipped the non-urgent disciplines is standing in a field with no harvest, wondering what happened. The ant, I've often thought, is a remarkable teacher. The ant doesn't ask how hard the winter will be. The ant doesn't wait for the perfect conditions. The ant works. And the ant stores, and the ant prepares with such diligence that when winter comes, as it always does, the ant is ready. The ant has not wished for an easier winter. The ant has built a better nest. Now, most people do the opposite. Most people live like the grasshopper in the old fable, singing in the summer, eating as they find it, spending freely, saving little, building nothing, and then wondering when winter arrives why there is nothing stored. And the answer is always the same. They spent the summer being comfortable rather than being productive. They spent the easy season wishing the season would stay easy rather than using the easy season to prepare for the hard one. Here's what I want you to hear. The daily disciplines are not glamorous. They are not exciting. They do not make for dramatic stories at a dinner party. But they are the architecture of a life. Every day that you read, you are laying a brick. Every day that you exercise, you are laying a brick. Every day that you connect with someone valuable, someone who challenges you and lifts you, you are laying a brick. Every day that you work on your craft, your skill, your knowledge, a brick. And bricks, laid day after day after day, become walls. And walls become rooms, and rooms become a house. And a house, a well-built house, is shelter against any storm. The person who does not lay bricks has no shelter. They have only the wish that the storm would be smaller. Let me talk now about the set of the sail, because this metaphor has meant more to me over the years than perhaps any other. The same wind blows on us all, the same economic wind, the same social wind, the same winds of challenge and opportunity and change, the same wind. And yet some people are blown by that wind into poverty and some into fortune. Some are blown toward bitterness and some toward wisdom. How can the same wind produce such different outcomes? It is not the blowing of the wind, it is the set of the sail. Two ships on the same ocean, in the same storm, facing the same wind. One captain has studied his craft. He has learned the art of the sail. He has prepared his vessel, his crew, his mind. He has developed a skill, the philosophy, the discipline, to read the wind and set his sail accordingly. And he takes that wind, that same wind that batters lesser captains, and uses it to carry him forward, to carry him toward his destination. The other captain? He blames the wind. He wishes the sea were calmer. He resents the storm. And the storm does not care. The ocean does not negotiate. And so he drifts, or he sinks, not because of the wind, but because of the set of his sail. Now here is what I want you to understand. The set of the sail is your philosophy. Your set of the sail is your belief about what is possible, what is your responsibility, what is within your control. The person who believes that outcomes are determined by external forces will set his sail to drift, because why fight what you cannot control? But the person who believes that outcomes are shaped by the disciplines he practices, by the skills he develops, by the philosophy he adopts, that person sets his sail with purpose, with intention, and the very same wind that destroys the drifter propels the sailor. I have watched this my entire life. I have seen two people start at the same place, with the same resources, facing the same market, the same economy, the same competition, and one builds a life of genuine accomplishment, and one, not through laziness, not through lack of effort, but through the set of their sail, through the philosophy with which they meet the wind, one drifts. And I have never, not once, seen the wind determine the outcome without the sail having the final word. Let me be specific about what setting the sail looks like in practice, because I don't want this to be merely a poetic idea. What does it mean to set your sail rather than blame the wind? It means that when the economy contracts, you don't say, "I'll wait until things improve." You say, "What new skill can I develop in this season? What market needs are being created by this change? What can I offer that the current environment demands?" The wind has changed. Fine. The wind always changes. What is the best set of my sail given this particular wind? It means that when a relationship fails, a partnership, a friendship, a working relationship, you don't spend your energy assigning blame, building your case for why it was their fault. You ask, what did I contribute to this outcome? What do I need to understand about myself, about how I communicate, about what I value that this situation has revealed? How am I better equipped now, having gone through this, to build better relationships going forward? That is setting the sail. That is taking the wind, even the painful wind, and using it to move you forward rather than letting it push you back. It means that when you encounter a difficult person, a difficult boss, a difficult client, a difficult family member, you don't waste your energy trying to change them or resenting them. You ask, what can I learn from this? How does navigating this challenge make me more skilled, more patient, more resourceful? How does the friction of this relationship, this situation, sharpen me? Every difficulty is a wind, and every wind, set against correctly, becomes momentum. That is what the sailors know. That is what the farmers know. That is what the few know who spend their lives becoming better rather than wishing for easier. Let me talk now about the people around you. Associations, the people you spend time with, are among the most powerful determinants of who you become. I'm not sure people fully appreciate this. They think of their associations as a social matter, a comfort matter. They spend time with who they enjoy spending time with, who is convenient, who has always been there. And that's understandable. But it is not always wise. Here's the hard truth. Show me your associations, and I will show you your future. The people around you influence your philosophy. They influence your standards. They influence what you believe is normal, what you believe is possible, what you believe you deserve. And if you are surrounded by people who wish for easier, people who complain about circumstances, who mock ambition, who see every challenge as someone else's fault, then that thinking will seep into you. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, the way water finds its way into every crack. And one day you will find that you are thinking what they think, seeing what they see, accepting what they accept. Mr. Schoaf said to me, "Jim, don't join an easy crowd. You'll never grow. Go where the expectations are high. Go where the standards are demanding. Go where the people are doing the work, thinking the thoughts, reading the books, and building the lives that you aspire to build." That advice was worth more than anything I learned in any classroom, and I have tested it over a lifetime and found it to be absolutely, consistently, without exception, true. Now let me be fair. I'm not suggesting you abandon everyone who isn't performing at a high level. There are people in your life, family, old friends, neighbors, who may not share your ambitions, but who bring other richness to your life. Loyalty matters. History matters. Love matters. You don't need to be calculating and cold about your associations, but you do need to be deliberate. You need to have in your life at least some people who are ahead of you, who challenge you, who see more in you than you see in yourself. And you need to limit, not necessarily eliminate, but limit the time you spend with the voices that pull you down, that normalize mediocrity, that laugh at the ambition you are quietly nurturing. Because here is what I've found. Ambition is fragile in its early stages. When you are just beginning to think differently, just beginning to believe that things could be better, just beginning to take your first tentative steps toward the life you want, at that moment, you are vulnerable. The voices of doubt, the voices of mockery, the voices of "who do you think you are?" can stop you before you ever get started. And they don't always come from enemies. Often they come from the people closest to you, people who love you, people who are not consciously trying to undermine you, but who are unconsciously threatened by your change. Because your change implies something about their choice to stay the same. Be gentle with those people. Understand them. Love them. But don't let their limitations become your limitations. Don't let their ceiling become your ceiling. You are responsible, fully, solely, personally responsible for the associations you cultivate and the influence you allow. Choose wisely. And here is a question worth sitting with. Who are the 5 people you spend the most time with? Not who you wish you spent time with, who you actually spend time with, by the hours and the conversations and the energy you exchange. Are those 5 people pulling you up? Are they ahead of you in the ways that matter to you? Are they challenging your thinking, expanding your horizon, holding you to a higher standard? Or are they comfortable, convenient, safe? Because you are becoming an average of those 5 people, whether you intend to or not. That's not a metaphor. That's a mechanism. The people around you are constantly influencing your philosophy, your standard, your sense of what is possible. And that influence either elevates you or settles you. There is very little neutral ground. Seek the company of the ambitious, the reading, the disciplined, the growing, and be, for others, the kind of person whose company is worth seeking. Be the kind of person who reads and shares what you learn, who reflects and articulates what you discover, who practices what you preach with enough consistency that others can see the evidence of your philosophy in the results of your life. Be a mentor as well as a student, because the teaching deepens the learning in ways that nothing else can. Now let me turn to something that I think is at the very heart of this philosophy, and it is the matter of personal responsibility. Because everything I have said today, and everything Mr. Schoaf ever said to me, rests on a foundation. And the foundation is this: you are responsible, fully, completely, without exception. You are responsible for what you become. I know that's uncomfortable for some people. I know there are circumstances, real circumstances, genuine hardships, genuine injustices that make this idea feel unfair. And I don't dismiss those circumstances. Life is not always fair. The playing field is not always level. Some people start with more and some start with less. I understand that. And yet, the most remarkable people I have ever known, the people of genuine character and genuine accomplishment, almost always started from difficult circumstances. Not all of them, but most of them. And they did not succeed in spite of the difficulty. They succeeded, in large part, because of how they chose to respond to the difficulty. Because here's what the philosophy of personal responsibility teaches. It is not about what happens to you. It is about what you do with what happens to you. The same event, the same job loss, the same broken relationship, the same financial setback will destroy one person and strengthen another. Not because of the event, because of the philosophy with which the person meets the event. And your philosophy is a choice. It is always, ultimately, a choice. I was 25 years old and flat broke, and I could have chosen, as many do, to blame the world for my circumstances. I had material available for a very convincing case. I was a young man without much formal education, without family money, without connections, without any particular advantage. I could have built a magnificent case for why it wasn't my fault. And I would have been, in certain narrow ways, correct. And I would have stayed poor, and I would have stayed stuck. And the case I was building would have kept me warm at night while it was slowly costing me my future. Instead, Slowly, imperfectly, with many steps backward, I began to embrace a different idea, that my life was mine to construct, that my skills were mine to develop, that my habits were mine to choose, that my philosophy was mine to examine, challenge, and improve, that the harvest of my future would be determined not by my history, but by my planting. And that thought, that simple, demanding, liberating thought, changed everything. Not overnight. Seasons don't change overnight. But over the seasons, over the years, over the consistent application of better disciplines, better associations, better reading, better thinking, the harvest improved, and it kept improving. And it has never stopped improving, because learning never stops, and growth never stops for the person who is committed to becoming better. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Let me talk about the marketplace, because this is where philosophy meets reality in a very direct and measurable way. The marketplace, whether you are employed or self-employed, whether you're in sales or in service or in creation, the marketplace pays for value. It pays for the value you bring. Not the value you intend to bring, not the value you believe you deserve to be paid for, but the value you actually deliver. And value is a function of skill. It is a function of knowledge. It is a function of the disciplines you have practiced, the learning you have accumulated, the wisdom you have developed through study and experience and honest reflection. Here's the principle. Profits are better than wages. Now, I don't mean that literally in every circumstance. There are situations where a wage is exactly the right arrangement and a very fine arrangement. What I mean by the principle is this. Wages pay you for your time, which is finite. Profits pay you for your value, which is unlimited. The person who only trades time for money has a ceiling determined by the number of hours they can work and the rate at which those hours are valued. But the person who develops sufficient value, sufficient knowledge, skill, creativity, insight, leadership, that person can generate profits that far exceed any hourly rate, because value is not time. Value is what you know and what you can do and what you can solve and what you can create. And how do you increase your value in the marketplace? The answer is not to work harder at what you already do. The answer is to become better at what you do, to study your field, to seek out the best practitioners in your industry and learn what they know, to read the books that inform the thinking of the people at the top of your profession, to attend the seminars, seek the mentors, practice the skills, reflect on the results, to treat the development of your professional and personal value the way a craftsman treats the development of his craft, with reverence, with patience, with an understanding that mastery takes years and that every year of intentional practice moves you measurably closer to it. The marketplace rewards mastery. It has always rewarded mastery. And mastery is achieved not by wishing for a simpler field or an easier competition. It is achieved by becoming better, consistently, patiently, relentlessly better. Now let me talk about patience, because the philosophy I've been describing today requires it. It requires the willingness to do the work today for rewards that may come next season, next year, next decade. And patience is in short supply. We have always lived, though perhaps more so now, in a world that promises instant results. Plant today, harvest tomorrow. Invest today, profit this week. Start today, feel great by Friday. And when the results don't come instantly, people conclude that the approach doesn't work. They abandon the reading after 2 weeks. They abandon the new discipline after 30 days. They abandon the investment in themselves before the investment has had time to mature. And they go back to wishing it were easier. But here's what farming teaches us about patience. You plant a seed, and the seed is invisible below the ground for a very long time. Nothing appears to be happening. A week goes by, 2 weeks, a month, and the impatient farmer digs the seed up to see if it's working. And when he digs it up, he kills it. The very act of checking, of demanding premature evidence, destroys the process he is trying to support. The disciplines work the same way. You commit to reading every day, to exercising every day, to studying your craft every day. And for a while, perhaps a long while, nothing appears to change. You don't feel dramatically different. Your bank account doesn't dramatically change. Your relationships don't immediately transform. And the impatient person concludes that the disciplines aren't working, and he digs up the seed, and he starts over, and he plants again, and he digs it up again. And he wonders why he never has a harvest. The patient farmer leaves the seed in the ground. He tends it, waters it, protects it, keeps the weeds away, and he waits. And he does not interpret the invisibility of the process as evidence that the process has failed. He trusts the law. He trusts that seeds, properly planted and properly tended, produce harvests. He trusts the seasons. And in the right season, the green shoot appears, and then the plant, and then the fruit. And the harvest is worth every day of patient tending. The most important things in life grow slowly. Character grows slowly. Wisdom grows slowly. Trust grows slowly. A great reputation grows slowly. A great skill set grows slowly. A great business grows slowly. A great relationship, the deep, enduring kind, grows slowly. And anything that promises to give you these things instantly is not giving them to you at all. It is selling you the appearance of them, and appearances fade. Here's what I've found to be true. The people who are willing to wait, who are willing to plant in spring and trust the process through summer and harvest in fall and prepare in winter, those are the people whose lives improve continuously. Not in dramatic leaps, not in sudden transformations, continuously, year after year, season after season. A little better, a little stronger, a little wiser, a little more capable. And compounded over a lifetime, that continuous improvement produces something that looks, from the outside, like extraordinary success. But from the inside, it feels like nothing more than honoring the seasons. And one more thought about patience. The world will not always applaud your work while it is in progress. The seed underground receives no applause. The foundation of a building receives no applause. The early hours of morning practice, the evening hours of study, the Saturday mornings given to learning rather than leisure, these receive no applause. The results receive applause. The process receives nothing but your own continued commitment. And the person who needs applause to continue will stop long before the harvest. The person who is sustained by the philosophy, by the deep, unshakable conviction that seeds properly planted produce harvests, that person keeps going through the silence. And in due season, the silence ends. I want to say something now about the failure we run from and the failure we need. Because most people's relationship with failure is, I think, backwards. Most people treat failure as something to be avoided at all costs, as evidence that something is wrong with them, as proof that the attempt was foolish, as a reason to stop. And so they don't try things that might fail. They stay in the comfortable lane. They do what they already know how to do, in the way they already know how to do it, and they wonder why the results never change. But what is failure, really? Let me ask you something. What is failure when you examine it honestly? Failure is information. Failure is feedback. Failure is the field telling you that you planted wrong, or planted at the wrong time, or forgot to water, or left the weeds too long. Failure is not the end of the story. Failure is a chapter in the story, a necessary chapter, an instructive chapter, a chapter without which the rest of the story cannot be written. Every person of genuine accomplishment that I have ever known has a rich history of failure, not despite their success, as part of it, as the price of it, as the education that made it possible. Mr. Show failed many times before he built his fortune. My father lost crops to drought and frost and flood before he learned enough to mitigate the losses. Every author whose book changed my life wrote books before that one that didn't reach anyone. Every speaker who moved me to better had given speeches before that one that fell flat. Every business person who built something lasting had started businesses before that one that went nowhere. The willingness to fail, to try, to learn, to adjust, to try again, is not a character flaw. It is the mechanism of growth. And the person who refuses to fail, who protects himself so carefully from failure that he never risks anything, that person is not playing it safe. That person is playing it terribly dangerous. Because the greatest risk is not that you will fail. The greatest risk is that you will arrive at the end of your life having never truly tried, having never extended yourself beyond the comfortable and the familiar, having never found out what you were actually capable of. Don't wish for fewer failures. Wish for the courage to try more things. Wish for the wisdom to learn from failure faster. Wish for the resilience to keep going when the crop doesn't come in as expected. That's better. That's always better than wishing for easier. I remember a conversation I had years ago with a young man, sharp kid, smart, good energy, who told me he was afraid to start his business because it might fail. And I said, "Son, let me tell you something. It might. In fact, the first one probably will. Most first businesses fail, and it will be the most expensive education you ever received, and the most valuable. and he looked at me like I'd said something reckless, as if I were advocating failure. And I said, "I'm not advocating failure. I'm advocating the attempt. Because the attempt is where everything worth having is found." He started the business. It struggled. He learned. He adjusted. He started again. And the second time, with the knowledge he'd bought with the first failure, things went differently. And today that young man is someone worth listening to. Not because he avoided failure, because he walked through it and came out the other side with something irreplaceable. He came out the other side with experience and wisdom that no classroom and no book could have given him. That is the harvest of attempting. That is the harvest of wishing you were better rather than wishing it were easier. Now, there is a subtle but important distinction I want to make about failure, because I don't want what I've said to be heard as romantic. Failure for failure's sake is not wisdom. The goal is not to fail repeatedly without learning. The goal is to fail forward, to extract from every failure the maximum available lesson, to integrate that lesson into the next attempt, and to approach the next attempt with better information than you had before. Failure that teaches is investment. Failure that merely repeats itself is a different kind of problem. A problem not of circumstances, but of reflection. So after every significant attempt, successful or not, sit with it. Examine it. Ask yourself honestly, what did I do well? What could I have done differently? What did I learn that I didn't know before? What do I now know that changes my approach going forward? This is the discipline of honest reflection, and it is among the most valuable disciplines available to anyone who is serious about growth. Not comfortable reflection, where you affirm what you already believe. Honest reflection, where you challenge your own assumptions, where you look for the ways you contributed to the outcome, for better or worse, and where you extract the maximum available lesson from the experience. The farmer who examines an average harvest and says, "Well, at least the weather was bad this year," that farmer will have average harvests forever. The farmer who examines the same harvest and says, "What could I have done differently? What did I notice late that I should have noticed early? What will I change next season?" That farmer is becoming a better farmer. Season by season, a little better, and the harvests improve. Now I want to talk about what I call the philosophy of your numbers, because this is something I have found over the years to be among the most underappreciated disciplines. I'm talking about the discipline of honest accounting, not just of money, but of everything. Your time, your associations, your habits, your results. The honest examination of the numbers of your own life. Most people don't look at their numbers. They have a vague sense of how they're doing financially, a vague sense of how they're spending their time, a vague sense of whether they're improving or stagnating. And vague is the enemy of growth, because you cannot improve what you do not measure. You cannot fix what you will not face. You cannot plant more wisely next spring if you haven't honestly examined why last fall's harvest was disappointing. The farmer examines his harvest. He counts it. He weighs it. He compares it to last year. He asks, what worked? What didn't? What soil? What seed? What weather? What did I do well? What did I do poorly? And from that honest examination, he builds a better plan for next season. The farmer who doesn't do this, who accepts whatever comes in without analysis, will keep making the same mistakes forever. Not because he is lazy, because he is not honest with himself about the results. Apply this to your life. Look at your financial numbers honestly. Not the numbers you wish you had, the numbers you actually have. Your income, your expenses, your savings rate, your debt. Look at them clearly and without flinching, because the numbers don't lie, even when we do. The numbers are the harvest of your financial philosophy, your financial disciplines, your financial decisions. And if the numbers are not where you want them to be, the answer is not to ignore them more thoroughly. The answer is to understand them more clearly and to ask what philosophy, what disciplines, what decisions need to change. Look at your time numbers, honestly. Not how you think you spend your time, how you actually spend your time. By the hour, by the day, by the week. Many people are shocked when they do this exercise for the first time. They discover that the life they're actually living and the life they think they're living are quite different. The hours they thought they were giving to their most important work have actually been given to lesser things, to responding to other people's urgencies rather than their own priorities, to distraction, to the pleasant but unproductive. And the hours that the numbers show have been invested well, in reading, in practice, in relationship building, in genuine creative work, are often fewer than they imagined. This is not cause for shame. It is cause for adjustment. You cannot adjust what you have not seen. And once you see the numbers, once you have the honest accounting of where your hours have actually gone, you have the raw material for a better plan. You have the information you need to make different choices, to protect the hours that matter, to limit the hours that don't, to be more intentional about the investment of the most valuable resource you have, your time, which is ultimately your life. Look at your relationship numbers honestly. How often do you genuinely invest in the people who matter most to you? How often do you call your parents, your old friends, your mentors? How often do you show up, truly show up, for the people in your life? Not the presence of physical proximity, but genuine, attentive, engaged presence. The presence that says, you have my full attention, and nothing else is competing for it right now. The relationships that sustain us through life's hardest seasons are not built in crisis moments. They are built in the ordinary moments. The phone calls that weren't necessary, the letters that weren't required, the visits that weren't convenient but were made anyway, because the relationship mattered. And those are investments, made daily and weekly and monthly, in the accounts of the people who will be there when you need them most. If you have not made those investments, you cannot make a withdrawal in the hour of need. The account is empty. Now let me come back to something that I think is the most important thing I can leave with you today, and it is the matter of your philosophy. Not strategies, not techniques, not tips and tricks. Philosophy. Here's what I mean by philosophy. Your philosophy is the sum of what you believe about how the world works. What is your responsibility in it? What is possible for you and what you deserve? Your philosophy is the lens through which you interpret everything that happens to you. And your philosophy determines your actions. Your actions determine your habits. Your habits determine your character. And your character determines your destiny. Most people have never examined their philosophy. They have inherited it from their parents, their culture, their school, their peers, and they have accepted it without question. And some of what they inherited is valuable, but some of it is not. Some of it is the philosophy of limitation, the philosophy of people like us don't do things like that, the philosophy of waiting for circumstances to improve before taking action, the philosophy of blame and complaint and wishfulness. And if you have never examined your philosophy, you may be living by ideas that are quietly destroying your prospects without your even knowing it. The examined life, the life of deliberate philosophy, is the only antidote to this. And the examination doesn't happen all at once. It happens over years of reading, of conversation, of sitting with good questions, of listening to people who have thought deeply about these things and who are willing to share what they've found. It happens through the discomfort of recognizing that you have been wrong about something, wrong about what you deserve, wrong about what is possible, wrong about whose fault your circumstances are, and making the correction without self-pity and without delay. There is a kind of courage that is required to examine your philosophy honestly. It is the courage to admit that you might have been wrong, not about small things. That's easy. About the big things. About what you deserve, about what you're capable of, about who is responsible for your life. It takes a certain quality of honesty, a certain willingness to sit with discomfort, to look at where you are and trace the line backward from the current results to the beliefs and habits and disciplines that produce them, and to say, I see now. This is the philosophy that brought me here, and it is not the philosophy I want to live by. That moment of recognition, uncomfortable, clarifying, sometimes painful, is the beginning of genuine change. Not the wish for change, not the intention to change, the change itself. Because once you see the philosophy that has been running your life, you can evaluate it. You can keep what is true and discard what is not. You can replace a limiting belief with a more accurate one. You can replace the philosophy of blame with the philosophy of responsibility. You can replace the philosophy of waiting with the philosophy of planting. You can replace the philosophy of wish it were easier with the philosophy of wish I were better. And then, and this is the discipline that makes it real, you act on the new philosophy. Before you feel completely confident, before you have perfect information, before the conditions are exactly right, you act. Because action is the test of philosophy. Anyone can hold a philosophy in their mind. The proof of the philosophy is in the life. And a new philosophy requires new action to produce new results. The thinking and the doing must travel together. Here's what I've found to be true. Every meaningful improvement in my life has been preceded by an improvement in my philosophy. Before I made more money, I changed what I believed about money and what I was willing to do to earn it. Before I built better relationships, I changed what I believed about my responsibility to the people in my life. Before I became a better speaker, a better writer, a better thinker, I first became a better reader, a better student, a better listener. The outer life always follows the inner philosophy, always, without exception, and without delay, though the form and the timing of the change may not be what you expect. And so the invitation I want to extend to you today is not to wish for easier circumstances. It is to wish genuinely, hungrily, urgently to be a person of better philosophy, to be a person who has examined what you believe and kept what is true and discarded what is not, to be a person who takes full responsibility for the harvest of your life without resentment and without excuse, to be a person who understands the seasons, who plants when it is time to plant, and harvests when it is time to harvest, and prepares when it is time to prepare. To be a person who sets the sail with wisdom and skill, knowing that the wind will blow, and that what matters is not the wind, but the set of the sail. That is the person who lives a life worth looking back on, not the person who had it easy, the person who became better. Let me close with something that I think brings all of this together. Because there is, underneath everything I've said today, a single idea, and the idea is this: you are the project, not your career, not your bank account, not your reputation. You are the project. The continuous, never finished, endlessly rewarding project of becoming the best version of yourself that you are capable of being. Now that sounds perhaps like something you've heard before. Personal development, the language of becoming your best self, has been in the culture long enough that the words have started to lose their weight. People hear, "Become your best self," and they nod, and they move on, and nothing changes. And the reason nothing changes is that they've treated it as a slogan rather than a discipline. They've agreed with it, but not committed to it. They've liked the idea without doing the work. And the work, my friend, is simple. It is not easy, but it is simple. The work is to read a little more today than you read yesterday, to reflect a little more honestly today than you reflected yesterday, to practice your craft a little more deliberately today than you practiced it yesterday, to choose your associations a little more wisely today than you chose them yesterday, to plant a seed today that you didn't plant yesterday. That's the work. Accumulated over a lifetime, that simple work produces a life that most people only dream of. I have spent more than 40 years watching what separates the few from the many. The few who build the lives they want from the many who spend their lives wishing for easier. And I will tell you with all the certainty that 4 decades of observation can produce, that the difference is not luck. It is not background. It is not timing, though timing matters. It is not even talent, though talent helps. The difference is this: the few chose to get better. They chose deliberately and consistently to invest in themselves, to demand more of themselves, to hold themselves to a higher standard, to examine their philosophy and improve it, to associate with people who lifted them rather than people who kept them comfortable. The few chose to become better. And becoming better is a choice available to every human being who walks the earth. You've heard me say this before, and I'll say it again. The walls of your future are built from the bricks of your daily disciplines. Every brick matters. Every day matters. Not in some vague, inspirational way, in a real, concrete, cumulative way. The brick you lay today will be part of the wall you lean on in 10 years. And the brick you don't lay today, the discipline you skip, the reading you skip, the conversation with a mentor you skip, the hour of honest reflection you skip, that missing brick is also real. It is a gap in the wall, small perhaps, invisible from a distance, but real. And there will come a day, for all of us there comes that day, when we look back at the structure we have built, at the walls, at the rooms, at the house of a life. And on that day, we will know, with absolute certainty, whether we built it with intention or wished it into being. We will know whether we planted in spring or waited for an easier season. We will know whether we set our sail or blamed the wind. We will know whether we worked harder on ourselves than on our circumstances. or whether we spent our best years wishing our circumstances would change. On that day, I want you to be the person who looks back at a life of deliberate construction, a life of seasons honored and seeds planted and harvests gathered, a life of associations chosen with wisdom and books read with hunger and disciplines honored with consistency, a life of honest accounting and patient waiting and courageous attempting. I want you to be the person who can say, I became better. Every year I became better. Not perfect. Never perfect. And I stopped chasing perfect a long time ago, but better. Genuinely, measurably, meaningfully better. That is the only wish worth making. Not that it were easier, that you were better. And the beauty of it, the profound, staggering beauty of it, is that the wishing is the beginning of the having. The moment you shift your wish from easier to better, something changes in you. Your attention shifts. Your priorities shift. Your daily choices shift, and those shifts, small as they seem in the moment, are the beginning of the harvest. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. And then, and this is the part that matters most, begin. Now let me take you somewhere very specific, because I think the most powerful lessons are always the ones that land not as philosophy, but as image, as picture, as story. And I want to tell you a story about two men I knew, not famous men, not men whose names you would recognize, but men whose lives I watched closely enough over many years to understand what made the difference. The first man, I'll call him Thomas, was a man of considerable natural ability, sharp mind, charming personality, the kind of man who walks into a room and people notice. He had every apparent advantage: good health, a supportive family, reasonable financial circumstances to begin with. And he had ambition, genuine ambition, a desire to build something meaningful. I liked Thomas very much. Most people liked Thomas. But Thomas had a philosophy, unstated, unexamined, but as real and consistent as any deliberate belief, that the world owed him something commensurate with his talent. He believed, in some deep and unspoken way, that his natural gifts should produce their own rewards, that the quality of who he was should be enough, that circumstances, in time, would recognize and reward him. And so Thomas waited. He waited for the right opportunity. He waited for the right moment, the right partner, the right market condition. He had ideas, wonderful ideas, some of them. But ideas without the discipline of implementation are not assets. They are fantasies. They cost you nothing and earn you nothing and leave nothing behind when you've gone. And Thomas had many wonderful ideas, each of which was going to be the one, once the conditions were right. He did not read with the discipline that growth requires. He was not careless about it. Thomas was not a careless man. But reading felt unnecessary to him, because he felt he already understood what he needed to understand. He did not examine his philosophy, because the idea that his philosophy might be the source of his struggle seemed to him almost offensive. He was a good man with good intentions. Surely that should count. He complained about the economy, and the economy deserved some of those complaints. He complained about competitors who played unfairly, and perhaps some of them did. He complained about the people around him who didn't see what he saw, didn't support what he was trying to build, didn't appreciate what he offered. And all of these complaints had in them some grain of truth. But they also had in them a fatal flaw. They located the problem everywhere except the one place where Thomas had the power to make a change. The second man, I'll call him Daniel, was no more talented than Thomas. If anything, he was less naturally gifted, less charming, less immediately impressive. He was quiet, methodical, and unremarkable in the ways that impress at first glance. He had started with less than Thomas and faced more significant obstacles early on. But Daniel had a philosophy, also unstated in the beginning, though he gave it words over time, that his results were his responsibility, that the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be was a gap of skills and disciplines, not of luck, that the answer to every difficulty was to become more capable of handling it, that the answer to every setback was to learn faster than the setback could accumulate. Daniel read. Every day, without fail, he read. He didn't always read dramatically interesting things. He read about his industry, about human behavior, about history, about how other people had solved problems similar to his own. He read the way a carpenter sharpens tools, not because sharpening is glamorous, but because you cannot build well with dull tools. Daniel examined his philosophy. He sat with the hard question, is the way I'm thinking about this problem actually serving me? He changed his mind. Genuinely changed his mind, not just his language, when evidence suggested he had been wrong. He sought people who were ahead of him and spent time in their company. He asked questions with the genuine humility of someone who knows he doesn't know and wants to. He failed, often, and each failure left him, in its aftermath, better equipped for the next attempt. Not comfortable, not painless, better. 20 years later, Thomas and Daniel were both still alive, still in the same general field, and the distance between their lives was extraordinary. Not because fortune had smiled on one and frowned on the other, because one man had spent 20 years becoming better, and one man had spent 20 years wishing it were easier. I tell you this not to be unkind to Thomas, who was in many ways an admirable person, and whose struggles came from a place of genuine pain rather than malice. I tell you this because Thomas is not unusual. Thomas is, in fact, very common. The specific details change. The underlying philosophy, the philosophy of waiting, of unexamined assumption, of talent without discipline, is remarkably common. And it produces remarkably similar results in remarkably different people across remarkably different circumstances. You know people like Thomas. You may see something of Thomas in yourself. I saw plenty of Thomas in myself at 25, I assure you. And the question is not whether you have made Thomas's mistakes. The question is whether you will make them permanently, whether you will let the unexamined philosophy run your life, or whether you will do the difficult and rewarding work of becoming Daniel. Becoming Daniel is not a matter of natural endowment. It is a matter of philosophy and discipline. It is available to you today. It was available to you yesterday. It will be available to you tomorrow. The choice is the thing. The consistent, daily, unglamorous choice to become better rather than to wish for easier. And now let me turn to something that I've observed over years of speaking with people about their lives, their struggles, and their ambitions. There is a category of person, and perhaps you have encountered them, perhaps you have been them, who understands everything I've said today, who nods at the seasons metaphor, who agrees wholeheartedly that the set of the sail is what matters, who finds the story of Thomas and Daniel instructive and true, and who, having understood all of this, having agreed with all of this, does absolutely nothing different. This is the gap between knowing and doing, and it may be the most important gap there is, because knowledge without application is, in the accounting of a life, worth almost nothing. You can read every book ever written about agriculture and still have an empty field if you never plant a seed. You can understand every principle of navigation and still drift if you never set the sail. You can know with full intellectual conviction that wishing you were better is superior to wishing it were easier, and then go home and spend the evening wishing it were easier, because the knowing hasn't yet become the doing. How do you close that gap? I've thought about this question a great deal, because I have seen it defeat people who were, by every intellectual measure, more than capable of the life they wanted. And I've come to believe that the answer has two parts. The first part is specificity. A general commitment to becoming better is not enough. I will read more is not a discipline, it is an intention. I will read for 30 minutes every morning before I check anything else, starting tomorrow. That is a discipline. That is specific enough to be honored or broken, specific enough to be tracked, specific enough to hold yourself accountable to. Vague intentions dissolve in the first challenge they encounter. Specific disciplines survive because they have edges. They have a time, a place, a duration, and a definition of what done looks like. Make your disciplines specific enough to be unambiguous, and then honor them. The second part is starting. Not planning to start, not preparing to start, not getting ready to start. Starting today with whatever you have, in whatever circumstances you currently occupy. I have met many people who were waiting to begin their self-education until they had the right books, the right schedule, the right environment, the right financial situation. And the waiting was itself the evidence of the philosophy that needed to change. The person who truly believes that they are responsible for their results doesn't wait for the perfect conditions to begin improving. They begin in imperfect conditions, because imperfect conditions are the only conditions that ever exist. Start today. Read something, any good book, any chapter, any 10 pages. Start the discipline today in whatever form is available to you today and honor it tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. And in doing so, you are not making a dramatic gesture. You are not announcing your transformation. You are planting a seed, quietly, without fanfare, with the simple, powerful, patient faith of the farmer who knows that seeds, properly tended, become harvests. That is the philosophy. That is the discipline. That is the only answer that has ever worked, that will ever work, that is working right now in the lives of the few who have truly embraced it. Wish you were better, then do the work of becoming so. Let me tell you one final thing, and it is perhaps the thing that has stayed with me longest from all my years of learning and speaking and studying the lives of people who have built something worth having. The discipline is not the destination. The becoming is not the point of arrival. The point, if there is a single point in a life well lived, is the person you are in the process. It is who you are while you are becoming. It is the quality of your attention, your care, your engagement, your love for what you do and for the people with whom you do it. It is the dailiness of a life lived with intention. Because here is what I have noticed. The people who build genuinely good lives, not just financially successful lives, but good lives, lives of depth and substance and genuine human richness, those people don't spend much time thinking about their destination. They spend their time here, now, in this season, with this work, with these people, doing this thing with as much skill and attention and love as they can bring to bear. They are not indifferent to the future. They plant with the future in mind, but they are not so preoccupied with the harvest that they neglect the tending. They are not so focused on who they will become that they forget to be who they are today, doing what today demands, giving it what today deserves. That presence, that full, engaged, disciplined, grateful presence in the work of becoming is itself the reward. Long before the harvest arrives, long before the results confirm the investment. The person who is genuinely engaged in the process of becoming better is already, in the most important sense, a better person. They are already experiencing the life they are building. They are already living in a different relationship to their time, their energy, their attention, their potential. And that is the quiet secret that no one tells you in the beginning, because it sounds too simple to be profound. The becoming is its own reward. The wish, the real wish, the right wish, comes true not at the end, but in the doing. Every day that you read, you are a reader. Every day that you practice your craft, you are a craftsman. Every day that you choose better associations, you are a person of discernment. Every day that you examine your philosophy and improve it, you are a person of growing wisdom. You don't have to wait for the harvest to be the farmer. You are already the farmer. The question is only what kind. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. And then go, quietly, patiently, consistently, with the faith of the farmer and the skill of the sailor and the wisdom that comes only to those who seek it. Go and become so. That is all. And it is everything. There is one more thread I want to pull, because I think we have covered the what and the why, and I want to spend a little more time on the how. Not the techniques, I've mentioned enough of those, but the inner architecture, the way you set up your mind and your days so that the philosophy of wish you were better is not just an idea you agree with, but a posture you live from. The first element of that inner architecture is what I would call a clear and honest picture of where you are. Before you can plot a course, you need to know your starting point. Not your imagined starting point, not your optimistic estimate of your starting point, your actual, honest, measurable starting point. Where are you, really, in the development of the skills that matter most to your chosen work? Where are you in the quality of your most important relationships? Where are you in your financial discipline and your physical health? Not where you wish you were, where you are. This honest accounting, this clear-eyed, compassionate, non-judgmental assessment of your current position is the foundation of all intentional change. Without it, you're navigating by hope, not by map. And hope is valuable, but it is not sufficient. A ship that sets sail with a good heading and no knowledge of its current position will still miss the destination. You need to know where you are before you can chart an accurate course to where you want to be. The second element is what I would call a vivid and compelling picture of where you want to go. Not a list of goals, though goals have their place. A picture, a genuine, felt, emotionally resonant sense of the life you are building. What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are you doing? With whom? In what kind of space? With what level of skill and knowledge and character? The more specifically you can see it, the more powerfully it guides your daily choices. Because your daily choices are, in the end, navigation. They are small decisions about direction. And every decision, made consistently over time, moves you toward the picture or away from it. I have spoken with many people over the years who could not describe the life they wanted with any specificity. They knew they wanted more money, more freedom, more recognition, more peace. But they had not yet done the work of translating more into a picture, a direction, a specific orientation of their sail. And a sail without a direction catches the wind and goes nowhere in particular. The direction is not a luxury. The direction is how you know which way to set the sail. The third element, and perhaps the most daily, the most practical, is what I would call the discipline of small promises kept. Because the philosophy of wish you were better is ultimately expressed in small things. Not in occasional grand gestures, not in dramatic transformations, not in the moments when you rise magnificently to extraordinary challenge. It is expressed in the small promises you make to yourself and whether you keep them. Will you read today, even though you're tired? Will you make the phone call you've been putting off? Will you spend 20 minutes on the project that matters most before you spend any time on the tasks that are merely urgent? Will you take the walk, have the honest conversation, write the page, make the plan? These small promises, made quietly, kept consistently, are the bricks I spoke of earlier. And they do something more than build the wall. They build your trust in yourself. Because here is something I've noticed. The person who does not keep their promises to themselves eventually stops believing in themselves. Not dramatically, not in the way of a crisis or a collapse, but gradually, the way a tool becomes unreliable through neglect. They begin to discount their own intentions, to know somewhere inside that when they say they will do something, there is a real chance they won't. And that inner mistrust is corrosive. It undermines ambition, because ambition requires believing that your efforts will produce results. And if you don't trust yourself to follow through, you stop making ambitious commitments. And if you stop making ambitious commitments, you stop growing. And if you stop growing, you drift. The antidote is simple, though not easy. Keep small promises. Make your first commitments modest enough that you can keep them, and then keep them. Read for 10 minutes if an hour seems too much. Make one phone call if 10 seems impossible. Take one step if the full journey is overwhelming. And keep the promise of that one step, that one phone call, that one 10-minute session with complete reliability. Because small promises kept are the seed of large capacities developed. And large capacities, developed over time, become the person you are becoming, the better person you wished you were. And I want to say something about the relationship between wishing and working, because they are not in opposition. The right kind of wishing, the wishing that says, I want to be better, rather than, I wish this were easier, is itself a form of preparation. It is the orientation of the mind, the pointing of the compass, the setting of the direction before the action begins. The wish for better is the seed of the intention to become better. And intention, turned consistently into action, becomes discipline. And discipline, practiced over time, becomes character. And character is destiny. So wish. Wish with everything you have. Wish clearly and specifically and hungrily. Wish for the wisdom you don't yet have. Wish for the skill you've not yet developed. Wish for the character qualities that your life so far has not required of you, but that the life you want will demand. Wish for better associations, for clearer thinking, for more honest self-examination, for the patience to honor the seasons, for the courage to attempt what might fail, for the resilience to keep going when the field looks bare. Wish for all of that. And then go to work on making the wish real. Because here is what I have found to be the great truth at the center of this entire conversation. The people who have the most in life, not just materially, but in the richness of every dimension, are not the people who had the easiest circumstances. They are the people who wanted most urgently to become better, and who backed that want with the daily disciplines that actually produce it. They wanted better so badly that they were willing to do what was uncomfortable, to be honest when honesty was hard, to begin before the conditions were perfect, to continue long after the enthusiasm of beginning had faded. That wanting, that fierce, quiet, personal wanting, combined with the daily disciplines that honor it, is the complete formula. There is nothing else. There is no shortcut. There is no secret pathway. There is only the philosophy of wish you were better, backed by the daily work of becoming so, practiced with patience across the seasons of a life. And I want you to leave here today not with a list of things to do, but with a different way of seeing, a different question to ask when difficulty arrives. Instead of, why is this so hard? What do I need to become to handle this well? Instead of, why isn't this working? What do I need to learn to make this work? Instead of, why doesn't the world make this easier? How can I become the kind of person for whom this kind of challenge is manageable? That shift, from wishing for easier to wishing for better, is not a trick. It is not a reframe. It is a genuine change in the orientation of your soul, and it changes everything it touches. Your relationship to difficulty changes. Your relationship to failure changes. Your relationship to time changes. Your relationship to the people around you changes. Your relationship to your own daily choices changes. And as all of those relationships change, the life they produce changes. Quietly, gradually, inevitably. Plant in spring, tend in summer, harvest in fall, prepare in winter, set your sail, read your books, keep your promises, choose your associations, examine your philosophy, take responsibility. Start today. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were better, and then become so, day by day, season by season, brick by brick, until you look back at a life built, not wished. That is all I know that matters. It took me 40 years to learn it, and I have never stopped being grateful to the man who gave me the first piece of it on a day when I needed it more than I knew. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Now, I want to leave you with something practical, because all philosophy must eventually find its way into the specific, the daily, the lived. And I want to give you 3 specific reflections, not tasks, not to-do items, but reflections to carry with you from today. The first reflection is this: where in your life are you currently wishing for easier when you could be wishing for better? Be specific, be honest. Is it in your work, where you're waiting for a better manager, a better market, a better opportunity before you bring your best effort? Is it in your finances, where you're waiting for a higher income before you develop the disciplines of a good financial philosophy, not understanding that the disciplines practiced at any income level are what produce the higher income? Is it in a relationship where you're waiting for the other person to change, to understand, to meet you halfway, without examining what it would mean for you to become a better partner, a better communicator, a better listener, a better presence in that relationship? Wherever you find the wish for easier, and you will find it, because we all have our areas, the areas where our philosophy still needs work, that is the place to begin. Not the most comfortable place, the most honest place. The place where, if you are telling yourself the truth, you know that the primary obstacle is not the circumstances, but the person facing them. The second reflection is this: what is one discipline, just one, specific and daily, that if you practiced it consistently for the next 12 months, would most significantly improve the quality of your life? Not the discipline you're already practicing, not the discipline that's convenient, the one that you know matters and that you keep deferring. Reading, exercise, a daily review of your goals and your actions, a weekly conversation with a mentor or an accountability partner, a daily hour of deliberate practice on your most important skill. One discipline. Name it. Make it specific. And then begin it tomorrow morning, before the day gives you reasons not to. The third reflection is the deepest one, and I want you to sit with it rather than answer it quickly. The reflection is this: what kind of person do you want to be? Not what do you want to have, not what do you want to achieve. Who do you want to be? What qualities of character, of wisdom, of skill, of presence, of generosity, of integrity? What qualities does the person you want to become embody? And what is the distance between who you are today and who that person is? And then, most importantly, what are the specific daily disciplines that close that distance? Because here's the thing I want you to understand about character. Character is not given. It is not inherited in any meaningful sense, though our inheritance gives us raw material. Character is built. It is built the same way everything else worth having is built, through the patient, consistent, disciplined work of becoming better, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one season at a time. And the character you build, the character that emerges from years of keeping promises, honoring disciplines, seeking wisdom, taking responsibility, choosing better associations, setting the sail with skill and intention. That character is not your possession. It is you. It is who you are. and it is the most valuable thing you will ever have, and the only thing that no external force, no economic wind, no difficult season, no unfavorable circumstance can take from you. You can lose money, you can lose a job, you can lose a relationship, you can lose health, temporarily or permanently. You can lose almost anything that life has given you. But the character you have built through years of deliberate becoming, the wisdom, the skill, the discipline, the philosophy, that stays. And from that foundation, from that character, you can rebuild almost anything. The farmer who has learned to farm can recover from a failed harvest. The sailor who has mastered the sail can find a new sea. The person who has built the disciplines of becoming better can face almost any circumstance and navigate through it towards something worth having. That is what wish you were better ultimately means. It means build the kind of person who can handle what life brings, not the life that brings only what's easy, the life as it actually is, full of both spring abundance and winter challenge, full of wind that tests the sail, full of seasons that do not negotiate, full of seeds that require patient tending before they become harvests. Build that person. Wish for that, with everything you have. And then, beginning today, do the quiet, consistent, unglamorous, deeply rewarding work of becoming so. The seasons are turning. The wind is blowing. The field is waiting. Plant something. And let me say one more thing, because there's something I don't want to leave unsaid, something that underlies all of it, something that I've been circling around throughout this entire conversation without quite naming directly. The philosophy of wish you were better is, at its root, a philosophy of hope. Not the passive hope that things will somehow improve without your participation, but the active, disciplined, earned hope that comes from knowing, from having the evidence, the experience, the track record, that growth is real, that effort compounds, that seeds planted produce harvests, that a person who commits to becoming better will, in fact, become better, that the improvement is not guaranteed by one good day or one good intention, but it is guaranteed as any human thing can be, by the consistent, patient, disciplined practice of the daily work of becoming. That hope, that earned, evidence-based, philosophy-grounded hope is among the most valuable possessions a human being can carry. It sustains you through the winters. It gives you the courage to plant when the ground is hard. It gives you the patience to tend when the field looks empty. It gives you the resilience to try again after a harvest that disappoints. And it gives you, in the moments of genuine difficulty, the thing that all genuine difficulty most requires, the conviction that this too is a season, and seasons pass, and the discipline of the season prepares you for the next. Carry that hope, not as a comfortable feeling, as a philosophy, as a way of meeting the world, as the set of your sail, and go with that hope, with those disciplines, with that philosophy, and build the life that reflects what you are truly capable of. Because you are capable of more than you have yet become. That is true of every person I have ever known, regardless of what they have already built. The capacity for growth does not expire. The season for planting has not permanently passed. The opportunity to become better, to read more, to reflect more honestly, to practice more deliberately, to choose more wisely. That opportunity is present right now, in this moment, in whatever circumstances you currently find yourself. And the only thing required to take it, the single, solitary, completely non-negotiable requirement, is the decision to wish for better and to begin. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better. Begin now. Let me say it one final time because these ideas deserve to be heard more than once. They deserve to be heard until they stop being ideas and start being instincts. Until they stop living in the mind and start living in the hands, in the morning routines, in the daily choices, in the set of the sail. The same wind blows on us all. The same seasons come and go for all of us. The same marketplace evaluates all of us. The same morning arrives for the disciplined and the undisciplined alike. The difference, the only difference that ultimately matters, is what we do with what we are given. Whether we wish for easier or work for better. Whether we blame the wind or set the sail. Whether we plant in the spring that is available or wait for a spring that is more convenient. Whether we spend the winter preparing or spend it complaining. The choice is always available. The choice is always ours. And the choice, made today, starts a sequence that extends forward across every season of the life still ahead. So make the choice. Make it clearly. Make it specifically. And then honor it daily, quietly, consistently, in the full knowledge that the harvest does not arrive the day after the planting, but it does arrive. It always arrives. For those who plant, for those who tend, for those who set their sail and refuse to blame the wind, for those in the end who chose to become better. That is the life worth living. That is the philosophy worth holding. That is the discipline worth honoring. And it begins, as everything begins, with a single step, with a single choice, with a single day of doing the right thing when doing the wrong thing would have been so much easier. Begin there and do not stop. The seasons are with you. The seasons are always with you. That is the one constant. And the person who has learned to work with the seasons, to honor what each season demands, to bring to each season the full weight of their preparation and their discipline and their philosophy, that person never truly struggles alone. They are working with something larger than themselves, with the laws of the harvest, with the wisdom of the soil, with the patient truth that effort applied consistently over time in the right direction, with the right philosophy, produces results that no amount of wishing for easier has ever produced and will never produce. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were better, and the seasons will do the rest.